Well, if you've seen this movie, you know what I'm talking about, and if you haven't, put it on the list. I don't claim to be some highly knowledgeable film buff, and I hardly have any ethos behind what I say, so don't take it from me. Take a second to focus on the colors you see and the sounds you hear. I know that for me, I feel nostalgia. Nostalgia so deep that it makes me sink into my seat, so deep to the point where I almost feel anxious and unexplainably emotional. This is precisely where director Spike Jonze and everyone involved got it right. Between the performances by Joaquin Phoenix and Scarlett Johansson and the screenplay and everything in between, this movie has gotten praise well deserved, but what I don't often hear is a deep discussion about the aesthetic of this movie. Void of plot and dialogue, this movie does so many things right, not only explicitly, but very much implicitly. Pretty much what I'm getting at is that the aesthetic of this movie is powerful, and it warrants more discussion. But maybe I'm biased because I do love this movie. But come on, it looks and sounds great. But before I get too ahead of myself, meet Theodore Twombly, a hopeless romantic, a man-child who finds himself fresh out of a divorce, who comes home to nothing more than TV dinners and his retro-futuristic video games, until he meets Samantha, an AI. This relationship between man and AI is eerie, to put it bluntly, and by no means is that anything against the plot, because, 1, this actually proves that despite it being such a weird concept on paper, everything else works so well, you barely even notice how strange it really is. And 2, I love explaining it like that because it gets people thinking, how could this movie garner such high praise, yet hinge on such a ridiculous concept? So, how'd they do it? Way back in 1906, George Albert Smith successfully revolutionized the film experience with Kinemacolor. The predecessor to the well-known Technicolor, Kinemacolor lost its touch due to high expenses and frequent malfunctions. And since Technicolor's inception in 1916, it grew its way to stardom over the years and transformed film history as we know it, with hits in the late 30s like The Wizard of Oz, Gone with the Wind, and Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Now, why do I bring this up? Think back to any one of these movies and notice how the color palette is slightly oversaturated, but at the same time washed out. Take Wizard of Oz, for example. James Layton, in his book The Dawn of Technicolor, notes that, and I quote, "When these films started getting more colorful, that's what audiences reacted to. They loved this artificial fantasy over-the-top palette, and that's the way color shifted. It's idealized. Nowadays for us, this over-the-top saturation with an element of film grain brings nostalgia." Her looks and feels all rosy, oversaturated but at the same time washed out, and Spike Jonze knew exactly how to play to this nostalgia. I should note that a discussion of colors in this film would be incomplete without some discussion of the set design, which also largely determines how things look implicitly. Quite simply, the things in the background also have color. Theodore's playground is a retro-futuristic, but at the same time retro-modern world that feels like everything is closing in on him and that the past was leaps and bounds better than the present. They have computers and advanced AI, but they still write paper love letters. All the brushed aluminum and stainless steel is offset by an equal amount of mahogany in desks and chairs and everything in between. Jonze ties all this nostalgia found in the set design together with the color palette. In an interview with the Wall Street Journal, Jonze cited the smoothie chain Jamba Juice as a starting point for how he would build this world around her. From its clean wood paneling to its walls that pop with color to the retro but also futuristic zany logo, it's pretty clear where he drew inspiration. In her, the colors pop, but at the same time feel muted. Everything is pristine, and the world begins to feel like an alternate universe or something that could have been. Everything is so similar to ours, but at the same time it isn't, and this is exactly where it hits me the hardest. Jonze drives home this nostalgia by drawing on our past experiences with movies with similar color palettes. And for me, the weirdest part is that I can't actually place this nostalgia. It's almost out of nowhere, but nonetheless intense and emotional. These choices of color brought by the set design and post-production and color grading reinforce this overarching tone of longingness and loneliness experienced by our main character. When I picture this movie in my mind's eye, I see pinks and reds and see morning light beam through an open window, illuminating dust particles that do a little swirl, then fall to the ground. It feels like bliss. It feels like we're looking through a lens or a window into another world that is so close, yet so far. Arcade Fire, an indie rock band formed in 2001, is largely responsible for the score and soundtrack to this movie, and with their work, the movie elevates. The movie music altogether is mostly ballad-like, slow and emotional, but also emphasizes the feeling of nostalgia already packed in by the visuals and everything else in the film. It's times like these where I wish I could see into the mind of the magicians at work, in this case Arcade Fire, and fully understand what they did, why, and how they did it. But regardless, we can still pull a couple key things from their work and understand why it makes us feel. An overarching theme of the movie, what I like to call retro-futuristic modernism, not only exists, but is prominent in the music. Arcade Fire leans hard on the use of a saw wave synthesizer to give the music its sci-fi essence, but they also juxtapose this futurism with traditional instruments like piano, plain old piano. I think this soundtrack is, in its full meaning, masterful, full of mastery, because the songs are not only genius on their own, in that they swell in tempo, volume, and melody, all in tandem, but they most importantly mold with what we see on screen. It's well known by the average filmgoer that the music should incorporate itself with what you see on screen. Imagine a scenario where an action sequence is playing behind a slow ballad instead of a high-energy, high-stakes kind of orchestration. It just wouldn't fit. The music in Her perfectly reflects Theodore's moments of longing and excitement and sadness, all exactly where they need to be. At this point in the movie, Theodore is at his most sublime. He is so far deep in love that no one else in the world matters as he dances throughout Los Angeles. It's just him and Samantha. If I may say so, this movie is a masterpiece, because I've yet to find another movie that binds these elements of color and sound so deeply to the plot, characters, and everything in between. And if you know me, you know I love all things aesthetic when it comes to movies. I pay attention to how they look and how they sound because I'm encapsulated by things I don't fully understand. And quite simply, I don't think I'll ever fully understand why colors and sounds like these make me feel the way I do. But what I do know is that I love it, and all things that come with it, like the deep, warm feeling of nostalgia, or the chase that comes with trying to understand something that may never be understandable. Thanks for watching.